People of God and United Methodists of the Stanton District. I'm Dave Roachford, District Superintendent, and this is Palm Sunday, a very different Palm Sunday than those we would be used to from times past. But it is Palm Sunday. It's the day on which all the Christians of the world, in all our hundreds of thousands of houses of worship, remember what God went through, what God did in order to reach us by the life and the ministry, by the expanse of the reach of Jesus Christ. We remember that today, but in a very unusual way, because we are now scattered. As you're aware, this was the third of our 3 successive Sundays to date of worshiping in our homes, worshiping in a scattered way. I like to think of it as scattering, because we're still managing to gather, we're still managing to fellowship and worship, just in very different ways. Listen to some of the ways that people have come together on the Stanton District. In a number of our churches, we've had pastoral leaders like Chuck Cole and David Vaughn, Joe Kalis, who gathered people together by means of Facebook Live. People like Linda Cusiewolf, who reached out by means of the church website using a posted or pre-recorded video, as well as those who I mentioned who are having live cast. And in each of these services, pastors, sometimes with a small group of worship leaders, were embracing people through the web. Another, less visible way that we are fellowshipping together is through the urgent ways that we have been taking care of one another and reaching out to take care of our neighbors. Reflecting on that, I wanted to offer a text that I thought was brought to mind by the way the church is now going outside the building. We could say the church has left the building, and how we're ministering to others. What I thought of was the book of Esther. About 500 years before the church was born, the story of Esther was being passed down from generation to generation of Jews. It would have been very familiar to Jesus and to his contemporaries. The story, of course, is that Esther and a great many other Jewish people were in exile in the city of Susa in the Persian Empire. King Xerxes I, as he was known to the Greeks, was quite a tyrant, but also a leader of a formidable world nation. Esther was born a nobody to a people in exile, but because of her beauty and wit and some circumstances that are hard to account for apart from God's involvement, Esther is chosen to become one of his wives. She becomes his favored wife, the wife of the most powerful person in that part of the world, one of the world's greatest ancient empires. All is very good for Esther, living as she does in the palace, but all is not well for the Hebrew people. And they're basically seen as a latent threat just by the fact that they exist. If that sounds a little unnerving, it probably should sound unnerving, since the events of the last century aren't so long ago. In any case, a man named Mordecai, a fellow Jew and a family member of and advisor to Esther herself, offers the following word of caution as well as instruction to Esther. And this from the 4th chapter of the book of Esther, beginning at the 12th verse. Mordecai sent to Esther this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arrive from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position in the king's household for such a time as this?" Esther then sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go and gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, neither night nor day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. And when it is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law to do so. And if I perish, I perish." In fact, she does not perish. She is able to go to the king at considerable personal risk, and the threat is eradicated. No longer will the Jewish people living in exile as they do have to fear from King Xerxes. This was a story of encouragement in Jesus' day as people lived under the boot of imperial Rome. I think it's a story of encouragement to us today. We are living in a very different and much softer kind of exile. We too are scattered as once the Hebrew people were scattered. And like Esther, we could probably take it easy living within our own little kingdoms, our own households. But many around our district have not taken it easy at all. For example, at the Embrace Waynesboro Ministry, which is led by our pastor, Janelle Watson, individual teams, 2 persons in a team, have canvassed the neighborhood, talking with primarily persons who live in this lower income part of Waynesboro, asking the question, what is it that you need? Maintaining a physical distance from the person at the door, our prescriptions, our groceries, our cleaning supplies, are any of these things required? They've built relationships in that way in the neighborhood in which Embrace is operating. They've built new relationships in that way. We also hear news that pastors like Nancy Palmer out in Callahan are reaching out by means of connecting congregation members, one with the other, to ask much the same kind of question. How is it with you this week? What is going on with you? What do you need? Those connections made within the church to take care of our own and forged outside the church in community are an example of the enfleshment of the body of Christ, are an example of the fulfillment of Palm Sunday, whereby Jesus was proclaimed by people who didn't know who he was or the significance of his ministry. Now we know, and now we are reckoning it in a new way. We are scattered right now, but people of God, we don't simply have to wait until the time that we can come together again for worship in our former way. We can begin to become something new. Maybe this experience of scattering, maybe this prolonged leading shadow of Good Friday this year could mean for us a Lent that really is about others, about our practice of the Easter news in a way that will make a difference to our neighbors. Maybe the lavishness of our care for them by providing something as ordinary as cans of soup or some quantity of hand sanitizer will say something about the fact that our churches are no longer prisoner to their buildings or their prior habits. This is Palm Sunday, and what this week can become, what the Easter season can become, is up to God and up to ourselves. It is for such a time as this that we are the Stanton District.